Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, talking about why you should sell your records. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So I know this might sound a little taboo, but there's nothing wrong with selling your albums. I know people like to look on social media and have these huge, gigantic record collections, but I think in most instances, it's not all that practical. There's really no need to have a bunch of albums that you're never going to listen to. And that's why over the last couple of years, I've tried to go through multiple times. And, each time I'll go through and, pick out, I try to get at least like 40 or 50 albums together. Stuff that it's either duplicates or I've got better sounding versions of those albums, and sell them off and use that money in better ways instead of just having them sit on a shelf. And whenever this topic is brought up, people always say, don't sell your albums off because you're going to regret selling something. And you might regret selling an album or two. But I think for the most part, going through your record collection and seeing things like, hey, I'm not going to listen to this, or I don't listen to this very often, even if it is a valuable album, I just don't see a reason to hold on to it. And this is going to differ for just about everybody out there, but I try to keep my record collection under a certain size. Whether that's, I think right now it's about 1,500 albums. Once I go over that, I try to sell off and get me back below 1,500, just because I don't want to have this big bloated record collection that I just can't listen to. And that number for some people might be 100, it might be 500, it might be 5,000. It's something that's going to be very, specific to each individual person. And for a long time, I was somebody that said, I've got no interest in ever selling any of my albums. But as time has gone on and my collection has grown and grown, it's become a very apparent to me that it just doesn't make sense to sit on all these albums, especially if I have got multiple copies of albums. It makes more sense to sell those off, keep like one or two copies of an album, and then sell off the other ones. Or if I bought albums just because they were on sale or I got a good deal on them, if they're just sitting on the shelf and I'm not listening to them, or I know I'm not going to listen to them more than like once or twice a year, honestly, it makes more sense just to stream the album and sell off those copies. I'll go through my record collection and really try to thin it out a little bit, try to get rid of stuff that I know I won't listen to again, or duplicates that I think I've got a better sounding version. I'll get rid of the other pressing I have. Just try to get rid of some stuff that I know I don't really need in my collection. I really think this is a great habit to have because, over time, you just accumulate more and more albums, especially if you're buying quite a bit, over the course of the year, especially if you've been collecting records for a long time. Musical interests evolve over time. And yes, I have the bands, there's still my like core favorite bands that I've loved for, 30 plus years. But as I come across new bands and come across new music, sometimes after, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, I'll lose interest in some of those albums. And if I know I'm not going to listen to it again, there's really no reason for me to hold it in my collection. So I think going through and refreshing my record collection every year or so, I think really kind of helps me kind of reflect more on what my current interests are. And if you're somebody that has a limited space for records, after you get, 1,000, 1,500 plus, they start taking up a lot of space. So trimming the fat off your record collection is a good way to keep it confined, to not really overgrowing the area, and also kind of makes room for all those new albums you're going to find. And even as somebody that has a lot of space here in my office, I can easily collect, at least double the albums I have now. I really don't want to. I don't want to get to a point where I've got a lot of albums that I just can't listen to, that just sit on the shelf and just collect dust and never get played again. Something else I've discovered over the last several years I've been doing this is, as I go through my record collection, I kind of rediscover a lot of stuff that I'd completely forgotten about. And I'm sure this happens to a lot of people out there, really regardless of the size of your record collection. You buy an album, maybe you buy a couple of albums, you listen to it once or twice, you put it on the shelf, and then you kind of forget that you even have it, unless you're going through your record collection pretty regularly and kind of looking for those things you'd forgotten about. They kind of sit there and just not get listened to. So like I said, when I go through my record collection, thinning out some of the stuff I don't want, I always discover 3 or 4 albums. I'm like, hey, I've been listening to this a long time. I love this album. I'll put it on and, remember why I bought it. I think the most obvious reason to go through your record collection periodically is it's a good way to get more money to reinvest in albums that you might listen to a lot more than what you've got sitting on the shelf. And that's typically what I do when I go to the record store. I'll get together. I typically don't go unless I've got maybe 50 to 75 albums to sell, and I'll take that collection in, sell it off, and then I'll find a couple of really great albums that maybe at one point were a little out of my price range, and use that money to reinvest into those albums. But a little word of advice that I'll throw out there if you do want to go through your record collection is make sure you know what you have. Go through Discogs. I think Discogs is a great resource to get an idea of what the value of your albums are. Yes, you're not going to get anywhere close to, I think, what the median or maximum value is on those albums, but it'll give you a price range. I go somewhere between the lowest price and the middle price. That kind of gives me at least a reference of what to expect for those albums. And I'll also throw out there that if you're going to do this, if you're going to go through your record collection and you're going to take to a record store and sell them, have a realistic value for your albums. Don't go in there and think you're going to get absolute maximum dollar value for them, because those record stores need to turn around and sell themselves. They need to sell it for a profit. They're not going to be able to offer you anywhere close to maximum value. If you want to get maximum value, just sell them on Discogs. I've seen pictures pop up on social media over the last several years of these like gigantic, massive record collections where they're 15, 20,000 plus albums. And my first thought is, how do you listen to any of that? Like, how do you have time to listen to even a fraction of those albums? And while it's cool looking to see these big walls of records around a house, I just don't think it's all that practical. And even though I'm not somebody that really fixates on the value of my record collection, it is nice to go through the collection every year, pull some stuff out, and then you realize, hey, I bought this for, pretty cheap, a number of years ago, and now it's worth, 2, 3, 4 times the original price. And hey, if I don't listen to it, there's no sense in me keeping this album just because it's valuable. I'm going to take that to the store, sell that off, let somebody else enjoy that album. Because ultimately, records are made to be played. Having them sit on your shelf, for years on end without being listened to is a disservice to the album. It's a disservice to the fans that really would enjoy that album also. So take that album, sell it off, pass it along to somebody that might enjoy it more. And something I've noticed in my area over the last couple of years is the used record market has really dried up. I think more and more people are holding on to their albums. I don't know if it's because they are going to listen to all these or they do listen to all their albums, or there are a lot of people out there that just do it as an investment, holding on to when those albums are very valuable and they're able to sell them off. But, as the market goes up and down, you really don't know what the value of those albums are going to be in the years to come. But before you go into selling records from your collection, I think there is some research to do. Go online. There's lots of record groups out there. Talk to people that in your area that have sold albums and try to find what stores are really good and reliable to sell your records to. And for several years, I considered myself a completionist. If there was a band that I really loved their music, I was going to go through and buy all their albums, really regardless of how often I was going to listen to some of them. But as time has gone on, I've tried to break away from that and not do that as much. Really just like my core favorite bands that I'll do that with. But, so having those albums from other artists that I know I'm not going to listen to, those are the things that I kind of go through and try to trim out every year. So for the most part, my record collection has or contains a lot of the back catalog of releases that I really want to listen to. But moving forward, really the only things I buy now are new releases or big anniversary releases. And what I do with those, if I listen to those and they sound better than the older pressings I have, I'll take those older pressings, set them aside. I've got a whole cube in my shelving unit that I use just for albums I know I'm going to sell. As I go through over the course of the year, if I pull stuff out or I'm going through albums, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to listen to that. I'll just put that in that cube, then hold off and kind of put them all together to sell them all at once. And I remember coming across an article a few years back about how, selling your records or selling parts of your record collection is going to ruin your life and you're going to regret it. And it's just not the case. I think it's perfectly natural and something that's really everyone, I think, should do at some point. Maybe not every year, but at least every few years, go through and kind of trim out some of those albums. And from memory, I think the whole point of that article was, you're not going to get back in return anything close to the value of what you have invested in that album. And, that's not always the case. Yes, sometimes that's true, but a lot of times if you're just going to be sitting on those and not listening to them, really there is no value to them to you. And I think it's something that a lot of people really need to get to in their record collecting is just knowing when to just let it go. And I think if you're somebody that has collected records for a very long time, over time you lose interest in some artists, you lose interest in some genres. And, after a while, it just makes more sense to kind of trim those out and reinvest that money in other ways, either in your record collection or in other ways in your life. And in kind of a strange way, it's almost like giving back to the record collecting community because, it puts more used albums out into circulation. And, the more that's out there, the easier it is for people to find stuff that they're really looking for. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot over the last several years. And to be honest, I've probably sold off over the last 2 or 3 years, probably at least a couple hundred albums. I don't think I've regretted selling any of them. But drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Have you guys sold off parts of your record collection before? What was your experience doing it? And have you ever regretted selling an album? Because it's something I haven't come across, so I kind of think I'm going down at least the right path for my record collection. But let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me all thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.